Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing stories of personal transformation and collective healing from people who have been touched by cancer. My name is Cheryl Buck, and I will be guiding today's conversation. My guest today is Sandra Marinella. Sandra teaches writing as a tool for healing and transformation. For the past decade, she has inspired hope among hundreds of veterans and cancer thrivers. Her book is titled The Story You Need to Tell and is accompanied by StoryYouTell.com, where you can read dozens of inspiring stories and discover lots of writing tips and tools. This episode contains a reference to sexual assault. Please take care of yourselves and each other. I just want to say I'm so honored that you're here and that we're going to do this interview. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. I love the work that you are doing and I follow it. And I think it's a great addition to our world. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you for saying that. So I thought we'd start out with some of your background and then when did you start writing? Because you are an author, you are an amazing writer, and I'd like to hear a little bit about how that entered into your early years.
Absolutely, Cheryl. Just let me say again, it's really a joy to be here with you. Your work is important, and I'm just happy I can be part of it.
Thank you.
I grew up in Indiana. And I went to the Southport schools. I had two brothers. It was a wonderful family. I was very involved in school and church. And my dad was very involved in travel. And that complicated my life when I was 9 years old because he was taking a project overseas in England to work on jet engines and live in Derby, England. And so at the age of 9 and 10, our family moved to England. And that would have been fine, but my dad determined that we weren't going to live with the other families who were over there with us, that we were going to live in a little coal mining town named Kilbourne.
Oh,
And
wow.
we moved to Kilbourne. Yeah, it was quite a shock for a 9-year-old to go to school and not quite understand what people were saying and wearing a uniform. All these things were just really outside my world.
Yes.
But it was okay. My dad, I look back now and realize that within the year of returning from England, that I realized what a great opportunity that had been and how much growth it brought. And while I was there, my dad had actually, I think, maybe inspired my writing. He gave me a copy of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and he gave me my first little diary. And at the age of 9, I started keeping that little red diary. I don't know that I said much more than, well, we had to eat this weird pudding at school. But I really began the process of noticing details, writing things down, and becoming interested in words. And later, I would think, as I went to college, that I wanted to be a writer or a psychologist. That I was really fascinated by people and how they thought and how they grew and how they changed. But I didn't have at Purdue the best experiences my first year because I struggled with rat lab because all of our rats died and the research was terminated, and it was perplexing, to think of rat lab as a future psychology career.
Why were you in a rat lab?
Oh, psychology begins with rat lab. It begins with doing tests on rats, trying to figure them out, try to understand, try to learn from their behaviors as we try to do with humans. So it was a little bit perplexing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was writing, but I wasn't 100%. My English teacher wasn't 100% behind my writing, and that was discouraging. I thought maybe I'm not meant to be a writer. And eventually I made my way down to the basement of the church where there was tutoring going on, and that changed my life. That became what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach writing and help people learn how to be better selves, because that involved writing and psychology. So I changed to education and became a teacher.
Interesting. What possibly could the writing teacher have said to imply or tell you that, or for you to get that she wasn't really behind your writing?
Um,
Especially with
you
how you write, at least how I know that I know
know,
you've improved or whatever, over the years, I'm sure. But what possibly could she have said?
oh,
Love to know
that is
that.
that is so kind of you to ask. Looking back, I think it was more that I got B after B after B after
Uh-huh.
getting A's my entire life. I was like, what is this?
Uh-huh.
I didn't feel any encouragement or any that anyone believed in what I was doing. But I look back and I think that particular teacher was just very impersonal. And, it took me a while to weave my way back into writing at school in a way that I loved and felt appreciated.
Mm-hmm. That says a lot about the importance of the writing teacher. Now, you are a writing teacher, and I'm going to be taking a 6-week class with you, which I can barely wait. That starts, I think, next week and through Healing Journeys. I can't imagine taking a writing class from somebody that didn't encourage people. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I know you do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the greatest growth and the greatest change comes to us when we reflect and can see the positives, can see where we're headed,
Hmm.
or we can rework our story so we can see where we're headed in the future. Yes, I
Yes.
totally agree. You've got to be encouraged. You've got to find your strengths and build on those.
Yes. That what you just said is one of the things that I really wanted to have you talk about today, that you teach people that they're the author of their life story. And you say that one can change the way that one carries one's life circumstances, no matter what has happened to one. So, how many times can I say one? And that one, and this is from the forward of your book, and I really got that, in reading your book, and that you can shift your perspective. And I'd love to hear you talk about that. Like you said, well, you're not lying or making stuff up, but there's some way that you can become the heroine of your own story. Talk
Absolutely.
talk about that.
I would love to talk about that. I think probably that has become one of the things that I most love sharing with my
Oh,
writers and my readers is that all the neuroscience shows us, all the great thinkers. I mean, I'm thinking back right now to a book that was just absolutely pivotal in my life from college on. One of the things that helped turn me around in college was Viktor Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning.
hmm.
And in that book, he talks about going off to the concentration camp and watching so many people lose meaning, lose purpose, and give up.
Hmm.
And he had so much to lose. I mean, he had a manuscript with him with his life's work in it that was taken from him and destroyed. But
Mm,
he hung in there and he made it work. He kept meaning, he kept finding ways to help other people and to help them get through, whether they were ill or psychologically troubled. He kept doing things to help others. And that is so important. He changed his mindset. And in seeing
mm,
in that book that he changed his mindset, that was really pivotal in my life. I began to realize we can change our mindsets.
yes.
I went into cancer in 2012, which I really want to mention because I think was so pivotal in my own personal growth and
Absolutely.
change and
Hmm.
reframing my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And his work, Viktor Frankel's work, changed me. But when I got cancer in 2012, I was a teacher at a college teaching creative writing, teaching educators as well. And I liked the work, but it was very stressful
Hmm.
and it was very hard. And I was taking it too personally. And when I got the cancer diagnosis, of course, I was in shock like everybody.
Hmm.
I was on the floor, upset,
Mm,
but I began to research And I realized that I would do what I always do. I would write my way through my cancer.
Wow.
I went out, I bought a journal, I began writing the story and guiding myself through it. And then I was able to come upon the research that showed me, the neuroscience that showed me that, wait a minute, our brains are always in transformation. We are always adding stories to our lives. And we can choose the stories we want to highlight, and we can come to understand our stories that are difficult, and we can mold them and change them. And our brain automatically does that anyway. We automatically have the ability that has been shown by the research of Michael Gazzaniga and Antonio Damasio. They have shown us that our brains carry these stories, but we also filter them into the left brain and we interpret those stories. And we have choice on those interpretations.
That's fascinating.
I think so too. And I think once we realize that, when we have hard stories, we can wait until they're ready, and then we can write them, rewrite them, remold them in a way we can understand and hold them. And I would point to everybody you're bringing on this wonderful podcast as an example of how that works.
Yeah, I've just started, I'm doing a writing class with Terry Tate. You know Terry, right?
Oh, I know Terry Tate. Yes, I've worked with Terry Tate.
Yes.
I love Terry Tate.
I know, wonderful. Me too. Oh, yeah. Beyond. And I've never written really before. And I'm writing, the memories that come up are just like, where did that come from? And they were a lot of things that I would write about, something like art installation that I did when I was in graduate school in Berkeley, California. And I did an installation piece in a gallery. Then I had to write my thesis. I had no idea what my installation piece meant. I couldn't write. And I remember one of my teachers was so frustrated with me. I'd hand her something and then she'd go, "Oh, no. Cheryl, there's got to be more than this." And in this class that I was taking recently with Terry, I got part of what that art piece meant and how it related to my life. And it was just so moving, and it really got me hooked on writing. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Understanding myself, that's always fascinating.
I think that's the most important. I've always loved writing for that reason, because as a child, I think I was somewhat shy, especially when we moved to England. And it was the writing that gave me this outlet that let me say what I couldn't say to other people, and then later to understand myself, and then maybe to have the courage to say what I needed to say to other people.
Yeah. Sandra, do you want to talk a little bit more about your cancer story?
Sure. So my cancer was 2012, and I got the diagnosis, and I shouldn't have been surprised, because as many of the people who listen to this podcast, there was plenty of cancer in my family. My aunt died early of breast cancer. My mother had breast cancer at the age of 60 and 80. She had it much later. And then I was diagnosed at 60. So, I was right on schedule. But by then I had thought, no, I'm not getting cancer. That's not happening to me. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You said the same thing, right?
I did. Absolutely. No, I'm never getting cancer. I was totally clear. I knew what I was going to do if I ever got cancer, but I was absolutely clear I was never going to get cancer. Okay, so much for that.
Yeah, sounds pretty much of a shock. I don't care who you are.
Exactly.
It's pretty much of a shock when you do get it.
Yeah.
And I call 2012 my year of cancer, because I went through a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of writing in my journal. And those things, well, I would say they all got me through. Probably the number one thing were my friends, were the people I was able to talk to, and who held a happy hour for me a week after I was diagnosed, and brought two people who had exactly what I had.
Oh my gosh.
And I had the beauty of learning from them and then starting on that journey with people who would back me up and help
Yes.
me,
Uh-huh.
because that's a hard journey.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
hard journey.
Very hard. So, I mean, I have to ask you this, to say this because I'm just shocked by what when you went to your first appointment or one of your first appointments to the oncologist. I can't say it. I just think it's horrible what she said. So now you have to say it.
Okay,
It's like,
I will say it because I was one of these people who read, Susan Love's book, The Breast Book, from cover to cover.
uh-huh.
And I was gonna take my journal and I was gonna take care of cancer. And anyway, so the first surgeon I went to, and I interviewed 3 surgeons, 3 oncologists.
Mm.
The first one I went to really surprised me. And in all fairness to her, I did say, if I were you, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I had been led to believe that, I just had a little lump and it would probably be an easy surgery to get that out. And her response to me is, if I were you, I would pop both those puppies right off. And I was just flabbergasted. And needless to say, she did not. And that's one thing I think cancer patients should always be encouraged to do, is realize they have choice.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
they can move forward. This woman, a very nice woman, but she was wrong for me.
Mm-hmm.
And she did not become my surgeon. And I went on to find a most incredible surgeon who helped me through all this.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, she was probably fun. A fun person that she would talk
She
like
probably
that.
was.
But, not in reality. She wasn't.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
gosh.
can look back and see she meant well.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Trying to
in the end, I ended up
yeah.
needing a double mastectomy.
Oh my gosh.
So I think
Yes.
she was right. She could see that I was going to go through a lot of turmoil and then end up having a double mastectomy.
Yes.
And I did go through some turmoil, but by the time I went through it, I was more than ready to have a double mastectomy. It was okay.
Yeah. That's important.
Right.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah. You could relax and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Another thing I found fascinating in your book is this thing about the tragic gap. Can you explain what it is?
Sure. The tragic gap is a word that came from one of the books by Parker Palmer. And he talks about how we straddle the line. There are things that we want and that we believe should define us and that we should be our story. And there are things that we just can't have because they're not available to us.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I wanted to write a book, and at the time I had cancer. And so cancer was making it pretty difficult to do. But the irony was that actually the writing in the journal that I was doing did become the book. It did turn into the book. So
Yes.
I was able to bring those together in a beautiful way. But back to the tragic gap, I think life is filled with those things that we really believe we want and that we, for one reason or another, are not able to have.
Yeah.
But maybe we can get them. As I did end up writing The Story You Need to Tell, I did end up sort of being suddenly just, I don't know, transformed by the writing. The writing just seemed to tell me, this is what you're supposed to write, not all those adolescent novels. You were supposed to be writing about the power that writing has always given you.
Yes.
To heal.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
That's what I did.
And you did it brilliantly. And yeah, I loved reading your book. Just, I was in it. It wasn't like I was just reading it because I was going to talk to you. I felt like I was in it with you. So anyway, it's just beautiful how you do that. And I'd love to be able to write like that someday.
But there's many purposes to write. And I think healing And just releasing story, there are so many health and spiritual and psychological benefits. And while I don't believe everyone should write, I believe if you're called to do it, you should recognize you don't have to be trying to write a bestseller, and you don't have to write with every period and verb tense correct. You just have to tell the story. You just put the story out there. And if you know your intention, whether it's to leave a story for the future, or to release a bad story from inside, or to write a story that you publish, any of those are okay.
Yeah, that's good to say.
It's
Yeah,
important.
I get that. Yeah.
It's important to understand that, I think.
You also said that it's important not to force our writing. Could you talk about that? Sometimes,
Sure.
when I think I'm going to write something and I freeze. I don't know where to start and then it's like, what am I trying to say? Like that. So,
Sure. Oftentimes it's referred to as writer's block.
oh,
And I think, no, I
that's
mean,
interesting that you say that. I never thought about it that way. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
well, but it's really an okay thing. I actually have argued with my students in the past that I really have rarely seen writer's block, because people come and they struggle. And I often, if you're struggling with a topic, you may not be ready to write it. So I encourage and guide people into other topics, or I encourage them to take a walk, practice meditation, do what they love to do that calms them down, and don't write. I mean, one of my greatest gurus, James Pennebaker, who did so much of the research on writing, wonderful research that has shown the value of it in our lives, always said, you should not write on any topic until you're ready. Apply the flip out rule. And I have found that that's really, really true. If someone has been traumatized, a topic is really hard, and it can take years before you can be ready to write about it. I interviewed Cheryl Strayed when I wrote the book, and she said that she published her book in 2012, Wild, the book about her journey on the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah.
And she said it took 10 years because she was not ready to write about it before.
Well, that's freeing.
Oh, yeah.
Very freeing.
Oh,
yeah. Another thing that you said I think this was you, maybe it was in the foreword, it was that untold stories don't go away. They morph into volatile emotions, flashbacks, and anxiety. And these are the people that you have taught. And I'd love for you to share, if you would, a couple of stories from your book, a couple of people. I think right off, the little girl who was a dancer and had a tragic accident, as I recall. Anyway, can you talk about that?
Absolutely. These are great questions. Thank you, Cheryl. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions. The story that I don't know is surfacing right now is one that comes up often when I speak at various conferences. I have some poems in the book from a writer who became a good friend of mine. She was in my veterans group. My work after cancer transformed. I became someone that decided to work in community venues and to go out and work with the veterans and to go out and work with cancer patients. And I work at my bookstore a lot because I believe in the literacy programs they offer, and they're beautiful, caring about books and reading. So I try to work in those kinds of venues now. And I was working at the VA hospital, and I met a poet, and she initially in our group was writing these poems about how awful she was. I think one of her poems was called Wasted Potential. And she wrote about how worthless she was, useless she was, and she compared herself to an avocado that had fallen off the tree and was rotting.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. And there was a whole series of poems that were really putting her down. And so in our group, we kept saying, we kept asking her about the poems, and it became very clear that these were poems she was writing about her and how she felt about herself. And so eventually we worked together for a couple of years, and eventually there became a change. We began to accept her and honor her. And I think she knew that I just love this woman. Barbara is her name, and I just love her. But eventually she started writing poems about being liberated, about finding herself, about being free.
Wow.
And we later learned that she had been a rape victim from 20 years ago and had not shared the story with anyone.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So she, by slowly releasing the story in her poems, she didn't like to journal, and she didn't like to do anything but write poems. And that's what she did. But they were beautiful. And eventually those poems changed. And she's now studying for an MFA in writing. She wants to be a poet.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It is. It's
transformation, right?
I love seeing these. Yes, I love seeing these changes in people as a result of the writing.
Yes, absolutely. In your book, you divide it up very well and have these 5 parts, and part 6 is writing to transform. That's so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you've been through it, so you recognize it.
Exactly.
What resonated with you? Can I ask that?
What resonated with me was, I think, my own personal experience. I talk about that time when I was 25, I guess, getting my master's. And the first time I wrote about it, I described the scene, what it was like in the gallery. I had 2 different sides. I'm not going to go into what it is. I'm not ready to say that out loud. But there was this hedge separating these 2 rooms. And the hedge was made out of, granted, this was the 70s in Berkeley. So I went and got those green things twist ties that you use to, on plants. So I did this gigantic, like 6 foot tall, 10 foot wide hedge, thick, like a foot thick. And I had no idea what that meant at the time. This was, 10 years ago. No, 75. This was a long time ago. And then, so I wrote about it, but I had nothing. Then the next time I wrote about it, I started crying, and I came up with, it just emerged what that was representing, which I'll write about it someday and tell people what it is. But it happened through the writing that I, after all these decades, was able to get a glimpse of what it was that I was trying to communicate in that art exhibit. So anyway, it's
that's powerful, Cheryl.
Very, very powerful. And honestly, I can't even tell you now, this was just 2-3 weeks ago that I wrote. And if you asked me to tell you what I wrote, I couldn't tell you. It's disappeared again, but now it's in writing, so I can go back to it and, and start to kind of dig in. So,
I love that. I love it because I think the greatest value, health value and growth value, psychological, spiritual value is the growth. I mean, we learn so much by the catharsis, the release. But when we release and then we come to some kind of understanding, as you did, that's a whole different level. That's personal growth. That's changing. That's tapping into your own transformation.
Yes. And I think that line that you have in your book applies to this, that if you have a story that has sucked the life out of you, I love that.
Oh, yes.
There is something about learn to write your way out. And that's exactly what I'm doing with that. So I'm in the beginning stages of it, but yeah. Thank you for listening to that. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm excited.
Someday I'll share the whole thing.
But not until you're ready.
There you go. That. Exactly.
I mean, you own that story. And I can't tell you how many times I have asked students when they're horrified by something they have written. It's true, but they're horrified by it.
Yes.
And they don't want anyone to find it. Then I say, you can burn it. You can rip it up. You can, just get rid of it because you don't want it. You're not trying to share it with the world. You just wanted to get it out.
Yes. That's how I feel about this particular story that I'm referring to. Like when I die, I don't want
Mhm.
my son
Right,
to, oh my
right.
God, what's mom writing? What is she talking about?
Yes.
So I totally relate to that. Yeah.
Good, good.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
really healthy way to manage
Yes.
writing, I think.
The things that I remember most vividly in your book are that you have these classes and you have these people and I start to get to know these people a little bit. And I'd just love for you to share a story or two as we kind of wrap up here about how writing has transformed or healed or, whatever other words come to mind, some of these people that you've had in your classes, either a veteran. I remember the soldiers. I think they
Hmm.
were in Afghanistan. Is that
Oh,
right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that keeps
Goldie.
coming Goldie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you share that story?
Oh,
That
I'd be happy to. I have a million stories and I never
I
mind sharing them.
know. Okay, good.
But that's why I think our stories are so important. I think they define who we are.
Hmm.
And I think it's only in writing that we really can really tap into, oh my gosh, this is who I'm going to choose to be. I like this story, so I'm
Yes.
going to take this forward. But going back to Goldie, he was actually the first person I interviewed for the book, and I just think he's a jewel. He was just amazing. He had been a very idealistic high school student, and he had been a senior when 9/11 happened. So he immediately
Hmm.
made this choice to go to Afghanistan or to go to the service to try to protect our country from the Taliban and from all bad things.
Hmm.
And so he ended up as a very naive, very beautiful young
Hmm.
man in Afghanistan in a squad of, I believe, 16, 15 or 16 guys. And
Hmm.
they were trained together Marines and they became like brothers. They became very close. And then he said, I got to tell you, I was not used to carrying a gun. I was not used to shooting a gun. I was not used to killing other people. I was not used to seeing my best friend shot and killed right in front of me.
Hmm.
And so that was his experience when he went to Afghanistan. It was very, very hard. He said it was very hard to hold those stories, to live with what was going on around you.
Hmm.
And so he often went back. They slept on the ground at their little compound. And he said when we'd go back at night, he said one night after my dear friend Nick Hand was shot and killed, we went back and we were crying and we were praying, and none of us quite knew what to do because we all love this boy. And he said finally, he said after I prayed for a while, he said most of the guys were getting out their headphones, putting on their iTunes and blasting their brains with music. And he said, I chose to get out my little green journal
Hmm.
and tell the story because I was so sad and I needed someone else to hold it and carry
Hmm.
it for me.
Hmm.
And that's what he did. And
Oh.
it was a sad time, but he's gone forward, and he actually gave me his journal when I was writing this book. He said, here's some good stories for you. And indeed,
Wow.
it's a very powerful treasure in my life. It's a gift. It truly
Yes.
is to have
Oh
that
my
book.
goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the greatest gift for me, and truly my transformation is that now I can teach this writing to cancer patients, to
Hmm.
people who have faced difficulties and hardship,
Yes.
and now I'm one of them because
Yes.
because I've had, I
Right.
can't say my life was that difficult, but my son had cancer, I had cancer, so there
Mm.
were we all have rough journeys.
Yes.
and teaching how to manage it with your writing and hold your story so that it feels safer.
Yes.
And so that you can understand it in a more positive light and live with it and move that story over. Like I was able to move my story into teaching cancer patients. And what a gift that is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Connect with you. What a gift that is. Honestly.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe someday you might teach those of us, we do workshops in Cancer Talks every other month, a 4-session workshop with different people. We've done workshops on grief and intuition. Adrian did a workshop. She was the first one, I think, on intuition. Anyway, maybe someday you would consider working with some of the Cancer Talks regulars, I'll call them.
Absolutely.
That's a thought that I've had, as a wish, I should say.
Oh, it would be an honor to work with you, Cheryl.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I like the way we laugh together.
I know. I think 50% of this interview has been laughing,
I know.
at least on my part.
Right. No, and mine too. Mine too. It's a joy.
Yeah. Well, Sandra, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say?
I think that it's important to seek resources like you, to seek resources like books and people, and to listen and to grow all the time. I think one of the things I find in the writing groups that's so beautiful is that if people are coming into the writing group, they have a growth mindset. And it takes a growth mindset to stretch and grow and learn.
Mm-hmm.
I was told by my oncologist, Robin Obenshain, in a couple of years, you'll see cancer as a gift.
Uh-huh.
And I know everybody's heard that. And I thought she was downright crazy. And I wrote about it in my journal. Said, this lady, I love everything about her, but this.
Oh.
And now I've gone back to her. I've written her story in the book. I mean, she was right.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a growth mindset, cancer can transform you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. Cancer Talks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. Write to us at info@cancertalks.com if you have a story to share. If you are moved to donate, please visit cancertalks.com/donate.